Welcome to Conspiracy Tapes by Skoob, where we explore the mysteries that challenge our understanding of reality itself. I'm your host, Ryan Martin, and today we're diving deep into one of the most controversial and captivating phenomena of modern times: alien abductions. Now, I know what you're thinking. Alien abductions? Really? But here's the thing. What makes this topic so compelling isn't just the stories themselves, but the evidence, the psychology, and the profound questions these experiences raise about consciousness, reality, and what it means to be human. Over the next hour, we're going to examine the most documented cases, the scientific investigations, the skeptical analyses, and the theories that attempt to explain what's really happening when ordinary people claim extraordinary encounters with beings from beyond our world. So, buckle up, because we're about to journey into territory where science meets the unexplained, where credible witnesses report incredible events, and where the line between reality and something else entirely becomes impossibly blurred. Let's begin where modern alien abduction phenomena truly began, with Barney and Betty Hill in September 1961. Before the Hills came forward, there was virtually nothing in the public consciousness about alien abductions. Sure, there was one case in 1957 involving Antonio Villas-Boas, but the Hills? Their story changed everything. Barney and Betty weren't your typical UFO enthusiasts. They were a respected interracial couple living in New Hampshire, leading stable, ordinary lives. Barney worked for the Postal Service. Betty was a social worker. These were grounded, credible people, which makes what happened to them all the more unsettling. On the night of September 19th, 1961, the couple was driving home from a vacation in Montreal. It should have been an unremarkable trip. Instead, it became one of the most scrutinized alleged alien encounters in history. That night, they witnessed something in the sky, a peculiar flying object that defied explanation. Barney, using binoculars, claimed he could see small, grayish humanoid beings with distinctive eyes inside this craft. But here's where it gets truly strange. 2 hours of their journey simply vanished. Gone. They couldn't account for this missing time, and this unexplained gap began to haunt them. For 2 years after that September night, both Barney and Betty suffered tremendously. They experienced chronic insomnia, recurring nightmares, and persistent, debilitating anxiety. These weren't minor inconveniences. These symptoms were destroying their quality of life. Eventually, the psychological burden became so unbearable that they sought help from Dr. Benjamin Simon, a respected psychiatrist in Boston. Dr. Simon found no inherent psychiatric disorders in either of them. The stress they were experiencing was directly linked to something that had happened to them, not to any underlying mental illness. This is a crucial point that would become central to understanding abduction cases. These weren't people with pre-existing conditions creating fantasy scenarios. Dr. Simon employed hypnosis to help the Hills recover their lost memories, but he was careful. He instructed them not to discuss what they remembered with each other outside of sessions. He wanted to see if their accounts would remain consistent independently. And remarkably, they did. Under hypnosis, a terrifying narrative emerged. The Hills described being forcibly taken aboard the spacecraft by those beings Barney had glimpsed through his binoculars. Once inside, they underwent thorough medical examinations. The beings collected skin and hair samples, studying them with clinical detachment. Betty recalled a needle being inserted into her abdomen, what was described to her as a pregnancy test. Recent studies, documented by researcher Jacobs in 1992, suggest that Barney also had a sperm sample taken, though he initially kept this detail to himself out of embarrassment. Perhaps most intriguing was the communication method. The Hills reported that these beings communicated telepathically, seemingly using English, reaching directly into their minds. And before releasing them, the beings gave them an instruction: forget this ever happened. Now, Dr. Simon himself interpreted their experience as possibly a shared dream or fantasy. But here's what's important: the Hills never wavered. They believed, with absolute conviction, that this happened to them. Barney, who passed away in 1969, was initially reluctant to discuss the incident publicly. He feared appearing irrational. Yet, even he eventually stated, "We had seen and been a part of something different than anything I had seen before. These things did happen to me." Betty continued sharing her experience publicly for years, never backing down from her account. Their story reached mainstream audiences in 1975 when the UFO Incident was released, featuring James Earl Jones as Barney. The film brought their case to millions, and suddenly, alien abduction became part of our cultural conversation. But stories, no matter how compelling, aren't evidence, which brings us to one of the most fascinating aspects of the Hill case: Betty's dress. This wasn't just any dress. It was the dress she wore during the alleged abduction, and it bore strange stains that would become the subject of rigorous scientific investigation. In 1980, a prominent but undisclosed scientist examined a segment of the dress and found it completely devoid of pollen or spore-based microorganic substances. Several researchers agreed that the material on the dress appeared to be biological in origin, but the real breakthrough came years later. In 2001, Phyllis Budinger, an analytical chemist with a distinguished 35-year career at BP Amoco, learned about the Hill case through a MUFON journal. Intrigued, she contacted Betty's family, and, after some initial hesitation, Betty agreed to provide 5 fabric samples for comprehensive analysis. What Budinger undertook from November 2001 to October 2003 was nothing short of exhaustive. She acquired infrared spectra from each square centimeter of fabric. She performed solvent extraction using both hexane and water. She conducted microscopic analysis. This wasn't amateur investigation. This was professional-grade scientific scrutiny. Her findings were remarkable. The stained portions of the dress were coated with a biologically sourced substance consisting mainly of protein with traces of natural oil. This protein had interacted with and damaged the fiber and dye of the dress, causing discoloration and weakening the fabric structure. But here's the kicker. The evidence indicated this substance did not originate from Betty's own body. It came from an external source. Budinger discovered that stained areas had higher acid content than unaffected fabric. The biological material, originally moist, had apparently provided an environment for natural biological growth. When water extracts from the stained fabric were agitated, they formed foam, indicating compounds similar to those found in detergents. The most visually striking feature was a pink, powdery substance and discoloration. Budinger hypothesized these alterations resulted from respiratory emissions and naturally occurring oily secretions transferred through contact. And here's what makes this theory so compelling. The areas of most pronounced pink discoloration corresponded exactly with where Betty claimed her captors had gripped her tightly, around the sleeves and zipper. DNA analysis revealed 3 noteworthy deposits. On the dress sleeve, they found an alpha proteobacterium. On the front of the dress, a DNA sample that could potentially belong to a human, mouse, or cow, notably not Betty. And on the upper sleeve near the underarm, human DNA presumed to be Barney's, which makes sense since he was with her that weekend. The Pinelandia Biophysics Laboratory in Michigan conducted additional testing and found something even stranger. The pink stained fabric exhibited the capability to increase energy levels in water more than unstained samples. Water derived from the stained fabric could actually accelerate the germination process of wheat seeds beyond normal conditions. Think about what this means. An unusual biological substance permanently altered the physical attributes of Betty's dress. The substantial damage to the zipper, hem, and lining suggested the garment had been subjected to significant stress. The concentration of discoloration in areas where Betty reported being touched by her captors adds layers of authenticity to her account. This wasn't just a story. There was physical, testable, measurable evidence that something unusual had occurred. Now, as compelling as the Hill case and its physical evidence might be, we need to address the elephant in the room: memory. Because here's a troubling fact. None of the abductees at a dinner gathering remembered their experiences immediately after the alleged events. For most, it took years before they recalled these incidents, often through hypnosis. And memory, as any neuroscientist will tell you, is anything but a reliable recording device. It's more like a constantly rewritten narrative, full of distortions, erasures, additions, and sometimes complete fabrications. This is called confabulation, where fantasy and reality intermingle so thoroughly that distinguishing them becomes impossible. Psychologist Elizabeth Loftus has demonstrated how remarkably easy it is to implant false memories in children through repeated suggestion. Over time, these suggestions become adopted as genuine memories. Similarly, Professor Alvin Lawson at California State University, Long Beach, conducted fascinating experiments. He hypnotized students and repeatedly suggested they'd been abducted by aliens. When asked to detail these abductions, the students provided extensive, elaborate accounts, essentially creating vivid descriptions of events that never happened. This isn't unique to adults under hypnosis. Any parent knows children create fantastical stories: purple dragons on hikes, monsters in closets. It's part of human imagination. But here's what complicates the picture. Not all abduction accounts are retrieved through hypnosis, and the vast majority of reported alien abductions occur late at night during sleep, which introduces another variable entirely. Beyond ordinary dreams, individuals occasionally experience rare mental states called hypnagogic hallucinations, which occur just after falling asleep, and hypnopompic hallucinations, which happen just before waking. These states can involve out-of-body sensations, paralysis, visions of deceased loved ones, and encounters with ghostly or extraterrestrial beings. Psychologist Robert A. Baker documented a revealing case. Someone waking up unable to move, seeing a vision of their deceased mother at the end of their bed, wearing the dress she was buried in. This is a textbook hypnopompic hallucination. Baker also analyzed renowned cases like Whitley Strieber's alien encounter, finding it matched hypnopompic hallucination descriptions perfectly. Waking from deep sleep, an overwhelming feeling of reality, inability to move due to the body's protective relaxation mechanisms during sleep, and encounters with strange entities. These phenomena gained credibility when Harvard psychiatrist John Mack, a Pulitzer Prize-winning author, published Abduction: Human Encounters with Aliens in 1994. Mack brought his considerable academic authority to support alien encounter hypotheses. He was fascinated by commonalities in abductees' narratives: descriptions of aliens, experiences of examination, metallic probes. But here's the question. Were these commonalities evidence of shared, genuine experiences, or were they the result of abductees consulting the same hypnotists, consuming similar alien-themed media, and participating in overlapping social groups? Under such circumstances, narrative commonalities would be expected, wouldn't they? There's another persistent feature in abduction tales that demands discussion: the sexual component. Humans are among the most sexual of primates, possibly of all mammals. Unlike many creatures, human sexual activity isn't bound by biological rhythms or seasons. We're surrounded by sexual imagery, movies, advertisements, television. It's a cultural fascination, perhaps even obsession. This context provides insight into why alien abduction narratives frequently incorporate sexual themes. Throughout history, similar motifs have emerged according to prevailing cultural beliefs. In the 16th and 17th centuries, women were accused of sexual liaisons with Satan, leading to witch trials and executions. The 19th century spiritualism movement introduced claims of intimate encounters with spirits and ghosts. The 20th century brought satanic ritual abuse claims, recovered memory syndrome, where adults reported newly surfaced memories of childhood abuse, and facilitated communication, leading to controversial abuse allegations. Each era's mystical experiences reflected its cultural anxieties and preoccupations. The human lens through which we interpret otherworldly experiences is heavily colored by social and personal contexts, blending reality with culture-induced imagination. Taylor and Francis published provocative research by skeptical psychologists Leonard S. Newman and Roy F. Baumeister that challenged traditional alien abduction beliefs. Their paper, Toward an Explanation of the UFO Abduction Phenomenon: Hypnotic Elaboration, Extraterrestrial Sadomasochism, and Spurious Memories, proposed these experiences represented escape into psychological masochism. According to Bud Hopkins's poll, an estimated 340 Americans were supposedly abducted daily since the Hill's 1961 case. Yet Newman and Baumeister noted no compelling physical evidence existed. They openly stated their disbelief in literal occurrences, seeking explanations in fantasies and mistaken memories instead. They observed abduction stories typically didn't emerge spontaneously but developed with professional facilitators, believers who shaped narratives. These stories were reinforced when individuals joined like-minded groups, fostering validation. Even without hypnosis, authoritative figures could mold shared narratives. The psychologist examined potential motivations behind constructing fabricated yet horrific memories, comparing this to motivations of individuals engaging in bondage and humiliation. Both scenarios involve escape from intense self-awareness through surrendering control, though in abductions to imagined beings. They highlighted demographic overlaps. Both groups tended to be predominantly Western, Caucasian, and financially well-off. They even noted similarities between alleged alien instruments and dominatrix implements, a faucet-like device collecting sperm, metallic contraptions encasing testicles. They proposed that, like masochistic rituals, alien abductions could transport individuals away from ordinary existence, dismantling personal identity through pain, pleasure, and suspense, before returning them with memories of transformative events. John Mack, along with peers Caroline McLeod and Barbara Corbusier, presented a rebuttal titled A More Parsimonious Explanation for UFO Abduction. They acknowledged Newman and Baumeister's research, but criticized it for lacking first-hand clinical data and cultural bias. They argued skeptical perspectives should originate from inquiry, not preconceived disbelief. Mack contended that nearly one-third of abduction reports occurred without hypnosis. These experiences couldn't simply correlate with sleep paralysis, as many incidents occurred while people were wide awake. Abductees were less fantasy-prone than suggested, and didn't typically seek self-validating communities. Crucially, Mack emphasized this wasn't solely a Western phenomenon. He cited examples from Brazil, the Zulu shaman Credo Mutua, and countless global testimonies supporting wider cultural context. So, who were these abductees? Mack and other researchers observed they didn't typically suffer from psychiatric disorders like schizophrenia, severe depression, or neuroses. Researchers generally required absence of such conditions before engaging with abductees. Any psychological disturbances appeared to stem from their alleged encounters, rather than causing their narratives. This brings us to perhaps the most mind-bending explanation, the interdimensional hypothesis, because even accepting abduction experiences as genuine raises impossible questions. Dr. Mack referenced 3 instances where implants supposedly removed from abductees were examined. These were composed of earthly elements. One case involved an object extracted from a man's penis. MIT's Dave Pritchard discovered it was ordinary human biological material. If these are physical extraterrestrial visitors, how do abductees pass through solid walls? Why do some people not see UFOs while others nearby do? Where do these crafts reside if not consistently visible? From which planets do they originate? And how do they traverse cosmic distances? Why do these beings resemble humans, and why do their medical procedures mimic ours? Where are the hybrid offspring? Jacques Vallée proposed an intriguing alternative: beings from a parallel universe crossing into our reality. Some abductees found this plausible. Anne claimed to experience shifts in time dimensions, describing entities navigating her consciousness through different time frames. Rhonda expressed sensations of being momentarily misplaced in time. Rich compared his experiences to cinematic illusions, where beings' arrival felt like profound illumination behind the scenes. This hypothesis reframes everything. Perhaps we're not dealing with extraterrestrials at all, but with entities from dimensions adjacent to our own, occasionally breaking through into our reality. It would explain the impossibilities, the passing through walls, the selective visibility, the dreamlike quality that nevertheless feels utterly real. So, where does this leave us? Between unexplained physical evidence, consistent testimonies from around the world, and theories ranging from psychology to interdimensional reality, the Hill case remains one of the most puzzling encounters ever documented. We still don't have definitive answers, only questions that blur the lines between consciousness, science, and the unknown. Whatever the truth may be, these experiences have deeply impacted real lives and continue to challenge what we think we know about reality and our place in the universe. But what if the strangest detail wasn't the abduction itself, but the evidence left behind? And what if similar patterns are still being reported today? To uncover the deeper layers of this mystery and the details rarely discussed, download Skoob app now to get access to the full story.